Hola gente seguidora, seguidores del grupo Grite. Hoy estamos acá nuevamente en otra reunión, en otro encuentro. Gracias a Pablo, Eduardo, Emiliano, con un invitado de lujo. Va a ser muy breve la presentación porque simplemente vamos a estar hablando con una verdadera leyenda viviente de la literatura en general estadounidense. Nada más ni nada menos que Mr. Joe Lansdale. Tenemos problemas técnicos, hemos intentado, pero no se ha podido hacer la entrevista con imagen, así que para no abusar del tiempo de nuestro invitado, hemos decidido que la entrevista se haga lamentablemente sin imagen. De todas maneras, lo importante es lo que conversemos. Así que, welcome.
Hello.
Hello, yes. Fernando said that without too much to introduce, because we are in the presence of a living legend, the one only John R. Lansdale. So we are all of us, we are very thrilled and we are very glad, happy, and honored to having you. So we would like to start asking the questions. Okay?
Okay.
Emiliano.
Emiliano.
Sí, muchas gracias, Pablo. Sí. Antes de convertirse en escritor full time durante los años 70, Mr. Lansdale escribía no ficción, lo que llamamos no ficción, particularmente farm articles. Mi pregunta es, ¿hubo algo de esa práctica que haya impactado en su escritura de ficción?
All right. The first question of Emily was about your um, time when you write nonfiction. So before becoming a full-time writer, you were engaged in nonfiction, particularly farm articles.
Right.
Did any aspect of that practice leave a discernible imprint upon your fiction?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was a farmer and I worked, in the fields, and I also had hogs and different animals of that sort that we raised. And my wife and I had a goat dairy. And I think the fact that I grew up in the country and was in the country and was around people that were in the country, that it affected the way I wrote, because I listened to their dialogue. I listened to how they talked. Also, when you're living like that, which is pretty much hand to mouth, you develop a whole different attitude about life. You realize that you got to be pretty grateful for what you have, for one thing, but second of all, it gives you so much information about people. And that and also the way I write, the voice I use is very much akin to the voices of East Texas and of rural people.
Excellent. Yeah. Absolutely excellent. Okay,
Emiliano.
Sí. Mirando toda su obra en general, muchos o la gran mayoría de sus trabajos, o en muchos de sus trabajos, hay un paso, comienza el libro siendo un género o trabajando con las pautas de un género y acaba llegando, convirtiéndose en otro durante su desarrollo. Pasa con The Drive-In, con Bubba Ho-Tep, pasa por ejemplo con Letter Maiden del año 2008, que es una novela que comienza siendo una novela de crímenes y termina como una novela de terror. Mi pregunta, o mis dos breves preguntas son, si comienza su trabajo de escritura pensando en una descripción genérica o deja fluir la historia, y cuál es su principal motivación detrás de este constante fluctuación entre géneros.
All right. Emiliano said that for taking your whole work as a whole, for instance, in Leather Maiden, the 2008, begins a rather compelling crime novel and gradually resolves into something far more akin to horror. When you embark upon a new work, do you conceive it within a defined generic framework, or do you allow the narrative to find his own allegiance? What if, I may ask, if the principal impulse behind your continual movement between genres?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll do my best to answer that. I grew up on comic books, and when I was four, I would read comic books, and a lot of the comic books mixed genres. And
of course,
I wanted to do that. Then that led to me reading all kinds of books. You know, Poe, collection of Poe was one of the earliest things I remember reading. Was given to me by my mother, who probably just didn't know better. But I loved Poe, and I loved crime stories, and I loved science fiction, and I loved adventure. And so I think all of that became early on just part of my DNA. And once that became established, I don't necessarily sit down and say, I'm going to write a horror story. Even if someone says, write me a horror story, I go, okay, I know that it has to have that element, but I don't sit down and think, how do I make this a horror story? Because my mind will find that throughout any kind of story I start. If I know that that's where I'm going is horror or crime, then I'll let that take its head, but I never let it lead me anywhere it wants to go. I'm trying to tell stories that are my stories. And, I've written some traditional things for fun, and I've done all kinds of things, but mostly a Lansdale story to me is a story that's very much freewheeling, if that's a term that makes sense. And when I get a story going, I let it take its own head. I know plot. I never sit down and say, okay, this is what the story is. I have no damn idea what it's about. And just every day when I get up, I just say, okay, where was I yesterday? What happens next? Now, that may be when I finish it, I may go, oh, you know what? I can go back and add a line here to strengthen this, what happens later. I can add a little foreshadowing here. But the stories sort of take their own head. I'm not a plot kind of guy. I'm sort of a, write it as the story comes to me. I try to have a style in the way I write, but I'm also very much a traditional old-fashioned storyteller who will sometimes use experimentation because I'm influenced by every kind of fiction, experimental fiction, literary fiction, pulp fiction, comics. And I just love what I do, and I let it lead me where it wants to go.
Great. Did
that answer the question, Emiliano?
Yeah. Great answer.
Great answer.
Es bueno saber es bueno saber que el amor de Mr. Joel Lansdale por la literatura comenzó leyendo cómics. Es
yes.
Muy bueno de
First say that it's good to know that your love for literature began reading comics.
Yes, absolutely.
As maybe
the comic that we had back then, I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. It was called Classics Illustrated, and those were based on novels and short stories. And so I was introduced to a lot of those there, which led me to read the actual books when I had the opportunity. But I think that in many ways I had, I'm reading Batman and Justice League or whatever you hear. And over here, I'm reading Jack London and I'm reading Rudyard Kipling. And then, and in the Classics Illustrated, then that led me to read the actual books and the actual story. So comics really saved my life because I was 4 years old when I got my first comics, and I realized immediately I wanted to tell stories. I wasn't thinking about it as a career. I was too young to know what a career was, but I knew I wanted to do that, and I tried to draw them too, but I wasn't much of an artist. But what I did find is that I got to be a better storyteller. And I love telling stories, and I always give comics their full due for me because they led me to everything. And where I lived, life was kind of colored gray. It didn't have a lot of color to it. But when I read comics that were so full of color, it's like it filled my head and exploded in color. And so from then on, I wrote things that were imaginative, that were fun, that struck me as exciting, and it made my life better.
Yeah.
God bless the comic.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Sigo yo.
Fer,
Su primera novela publicada, y your first published novel, was Act of Love. My question is, basically, ¿cómo llegó a esa novela y qué piensa de ella hoy, 40 años después?
Fernando refers to your first published novel, Act of Love, that it was more than 4 decades ago. How
Yeah.
did you originally conceive the book, and how do you regard it now with the benefit of the hindsight?
Well, I don't think it's a very good novel, for one thing. But at the time when I wrote it, I was on fire. And I wanted to write a crime novel, but there was something inside of me that was subversive. And I wrote very graphic stuff. And though
Yes.
I wasn't the only person doing it, there's no doubt in my mind, because I hear from people that were influenced, that influenced a whole. I mean, I was there before Silence of the Lambs. It's just he did it better. But I was doing a kind of approach to this where it had not only a story, it had a social issue, it had a lot of cinema influence. So to me, it was an exciting time, but it's certainly not is my least favorite of all my works. And I think it's mainly not because it was so bad then, but that time has caught up with it.
Great, great.
Emiliano.
Next question, Amy.
Yes, yes. Se puede afirmar que Mr. Lansdale es un escritor prolífico. Además de las tantas novelas y ensayos y demás que escribió, desde 1979, que publicó oficialmente su primer relato, en adelante, hasta el día de hoy, no ha habido un año en el que no haya publicado. Por lo menos uno y más también por año, ¿no? Mi pregunta es si Mr. Lansdale tiene la misma constancia al momento de su rutina diaria de escritura.
Okay. Amy said that in retrospect, one might fairly describe you as a remarkably prolific writer. Since the 1979, there has scarcely been a year in which you have not published at least one story. Do you apply the same constancy and discipline to your daily writing routine?
Yeah, I had a lot of stories published under pen names too, pseudonyms. So I was actually having stories that I was selling at that point that nobody knew the names, and thank goodness. But what I always did, my approach was, I actually learned it over time. I didn't start out like this, but after a few years, it only took a few, I realized that I was better off working in the mornings for about 3 hours. And when I got through working for 3 hours, I was done. But when I wrote, I didn't do multiple drafts. I started out doing that and I quit doing it because I just got confused. I got bored. I didn't know what to do. I had a mess. So I did one draft, but I polished it that very day. The day I wrote it, I polished. So in 3 hours, I could write 3 to 5 pages. Some days I would get 10 or 15. I mean, some days I was on fire, but I would always try to average no less than 3 to 5. I would polish it as extensively as I could. And then the next morning I'd get up. As soon as my feet hit the floor, I had my coffee, my breakfast, took the dog out and went straight to work. And I spent about 3 hours working. And if I got through with 3 to 5 pages in 30 minutes and I was happy with it, I quit. But if I didn't get it, I would work until I did get it. I rarely ever missed it. There were a few days when I didn't quite make 3, but boy, that was rare. And if I wrote 10 or 15 on those weird days when I did do that, the next day, I would make a point of rereading it even more extensively because, I hadn't had the time maybe to go over all of it. But what I found is if I did that 7 days a week, I think back then I was doing 5, so I had time with the kids on the weekend. Karen and I, my wife and I were doing that. And then it also gave me the rest of the day when I got through writing in the morning to do martial arts and do all the things that interest me and read and, just be with my family. So it was ideal for me, and I was selling, so, I had some periods where I didn't sell so good, but I was selling, I was creating, and I didn't burn myself out. And I know a lot of people, they'll just burn themselves out and they'll work 2 or 3 days, 10, 12-hour days, and then they don't want to work for a week or two. But if you do it like that, it seems like it's always fun, or 99% fun. There's that 1% where it's not so fun, but it's fun that way. And you don't dread the next day. You look forward to it. You look forward to that energy and that magic that's in that short time. And when I lay down at night after I've worked in the day, my mind creates the rest of it subconsciously. I don't try, like I said, I don't make notes. I don't do that. I might see something during the day, go, oh, that would be cool to add in. That happens. But mostly at night, my subconscious takes over. I learned to be a subconscious writer, and it changed my life. Because originally I was very conscious, trying to put these things together and do this and do that. And I just thought, I'm going to trust my subconscious. I'm going to trust my life experiences, and I'm going to go for it. And that's exactly what I did. And it made me a very prolific writer. I'm not prolific like the old pulp guys and some of the old paperback guys who wrote a whole lot more than I did. But I was sort of on the tail end of that period of writers like Lawrence Block and Robert Block and Ray Bradbury, all those people, and the sort of new wave of different writers that came along. So I sort of straddled that. And so I'm prolific to a lot of people now, but they were the guys that were really prolific. And I think that they affected me in the sense I thought, look, if these guys could turn out stories that fast, maybe I don't want to be that fast. Maybe I want to take a little more time. But gee, I'm not going to sit on my hands. I only live one life. I'm not going to waste it thinking about being a writer. I'm not going to waste it thinking next day I will do it. Someday I will do it. Hell no, I'm doing it now.
Great. If my colleagues allow me, I read and as you mentioned, your love for the martial arts. Yes. May I ask what kind of martial arts did you have or do or practice?
Oh, I still practice. I started in different martial arts, but over the years, I sort of combined what I was learning. And I'm in the United States Martial Arts Hall of Fame. And I established my own system. It was called Shen Chuan, but we changed the title. It's now called Lansdale Self-Defense Systems. So that's what we did. And that's because people branched off of my system and I wasn't entirely happy with all of what they were doing. So we just said, well, we'll do this. And so that's it. But I've been doing it 63 years with a few blips here and there. But yeah, it's a long time. So Lansdale Self-Defense Systems, or we call it Lansdale Family System, is what we study and what I teach. And you're always learning. I mean, I've been doing it a long time, but every time I turn around, I go, oop, I got to learn something new. And what I've been doing, that doesn't work as well. You got to change. You got to change.
Oh, yeah.
Like writing, it's the same way. And I associate it with writing because it's about intense focus. It's about economy of motion, which I also adhere to in writing, is economy of motion. And many other factors, getting in touch, staying in touch. That's a martial arts thing we use, but it's also a writing thing. You get in touch with that story, and I try to speak directly to the reader.
Yes, indeed. Being myself, I'm a martial artist for many years of Kung Fu.
Kung Fu? Which form?
Yeah. And right now for age reason, I'm a Tai Chi.
Yeah, well, I'm 74, and so I've backed off a little bit, but I'm still practicing.
Yeah, so
I had an operation bad last year, and I had to learn to walk again. They messed me up, so I took a whole year learning to walk and stand again, and I did it, and I'm back. So I'm doing as long as my body, just like writing, I'm gonna do as long as I can.
Thank you very much indeed.
And Eduardo,
Next question,
había levantado la mano.
Eduardo.
Un placer estar hablando con usted. Yo le quería preguntar, en algún momento dijo que usted tenía un público muy demarcado entre lo que era la serie de policial y la serie de libros de horror, sobre todo en la serie de Hap y Leonard, que tenía fans muy exclusivos, y si eso con el tiempo fue abriendo a que puedan cruzar ese umbral, que se expandieran en su literatura los lectores más fieles, sobre todo de Hap y Leonard, hacia el horror y al revés, del horror hacia el policial.
Will refer to that you say that you are a very well-defined bunch of fans. Those who follow you for your crime novels and the other that follow you for your horror novels. The question is that after the years and after so much novels and so on about mixturing crime and horror, as we discussed early, do you think these two separate tribes have mixed or something like that, or they are still separated and follow their path according to your crime novels or your horror novels?
I think some people think of certain things I write as crime, some as horror. A lot of my stuff, people will have it listed as horror, then others will have it listed as crime. So to tell you the truth, I write in one genre, and that's the Lansdale genre.
Big round of applause. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Con respecto a lo que estaba preguntando Eduardo y lo que preguntó Emiliano sobre justamente su rol como escritor de terror, como escritor de crime fiction y su prolificidad, él también ha editado libros, Razores Sadles, por ejemplo, y querría saber, pero no ha editado tanto, no ha sido tan prolífico como en su ficción. Entonces mi pregunta es, ¿cómo se siente en el rol de editor de historias?
Yes, Fernando is asking about, alongside your prodigious output as an author, you have also served as an editor, albeit less frequently. How do you find the role of editor compared with that of writer?
Well, if an editor has a good thing that they can suggest and it's helping you enhance what you meant to do, then that's a good suggestion. But if they are not enhancing what I meant to do and they're just saying, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? I just don't do it. And editors generally have understood that. I mean, good editors know that they're suggestions, not absolutes. The ones that are absolutes, they can go fuck themselves. But what I always do is say, hey, I want to do this, and if they can make it better, I will change it in an instant. But if they're not making it better and they're just making it different, I don't do it. But I think editors are very important, and it's good to have good ones. I've been very fortunate. I've had some very good ones. I've had a few bad ones, but not for very long. I've always taken the chance and said, look, my career is not about kissing your ass. My career is about kissing my own ass, because I know what I want, and I know what kind of life I want to live, and I don't want to make something I love become a misery.
Great. Absolutely great. Ok, Emi.
Sí, yo quería preguntarle por una novela que me impactó bastante, me impactó muchísimo, sobre todo por su final. La novela se llama The Bottoms, fue publicada en el año 2000, forma parte de una serie de novelas y novelas cortas ambientadas en el universo de East Texas. Y bueno, esta novela The Bottoms es una vívida y lúcida exploración de cómo las comunidades cerradas pueden generar un microsistema perverso, ignorante y irracional. Estamos hablando de un ambiente sureño, Estados Unidos. Aunque se cuenta en retrospectiva la novela, el epílogo pega un salto temporal y describe el paso del tiempo a través de los ojos del protagonista, marcando la decadencia y la resistencia de un lugar al cambio. El epílogo me impactó. Mi pregunta es, ¿fue su decisión plantear el final desde el comienzo?
Okay, Emily is referring to your novel The Bottoms from the 2000 that offers a vivid and lucid examination of how insular communities can generate a perverse, ignorant, and irrational microcosm. Though narrated retrospectively, the epilogue advances temporarily, charting the passage of time through the protagonist's eyes and underscoring both decay and resistance to change. It's really deeply affecting. What was the structural decision envisaged from the outset of this novel in the southeast of the Lone Star State?
Well, you know, the Lone Star State's a big state. And I write about East Texas, and it's not the same as Central Texas or West Texas or South Texas, so on. You know, they're North Texas. They're all a little different. They're all overlap a little, but we live in the woods. We live in creeks and lakes and all that sort of stuff, which is not necessarily true of the rest of Texas. Some of Texas looks like the face of the moon, you know, like up North Texas. It's like, you know, going over Mars or something. But it affected me because my parents were older when I was born. My father was 42. My mother was a few years younger than that. So they had been through the Great Depression. I have a brother. Well, I lost my brother last year, but I had a brother who was 17 years older than me. And so we always used to joke that we were both only children because we were both raised like only children. But we were also, in my case, not my brother's case, but I was like raised by almost like grandparents because my parents were old enough to be grandparents. And so one of the things that they were concerned about was the Great Depression, which the bottoms takes place during the Great Depression. So they told me a lot of stories about the Great Depression. I'd read a lot about it. My grandmother was, you know, she was born in the 1800s and she had been through that. So I had all of this background about that era and all of these stories. And it was a book I'd been wanting to write for a long, long time. And when I wrote it, it was like it was just handed to me. I didn't really have to do much. There it was. I got up every day. It rolled out. I also tied in a lot of folklore and different things like that I had grown up with because I felt like that fit East Texas, the reality and the folklore of East Texas. And so for me, that was the source of it. And for years, a friend of mine, Bill Paxton, who was an actor, he died not long ago. He was from Fort Worth, Texas, which was not East Texas, but he knew Texas. And so we got together and we worked on it about 8 years and we thought we had it. And then Bill had this operation that didn't go well. But he really understood it. And it really helped me understand it better, you know, because we would think about it in terms of what Brent Hanley did the screenplay. And we all talked about it all the time. And it made me realize how much of what I wrote was about my own life as well as my parents, because when I was born in the 50s, it wasn't all that different from the 1930s. There were differences, but in East Texas, they weren't great differences. You know, a lot of racial problems, a lot of the world looked pretty much the same. And so, you know, it was different, but it was still, there was a strong connection there. And I think I realized when Bill and I would talk that I was older than Bill, but I realized, I wrote about the 30s, but I also wrote about the 50s because no matter what you write, you're always writing about your own time in one manner, shape, or form. You know, I was writing about the 30s, which wasn't my time, but I was also writing about the 50s when I was born and the 60s, but I was also writing at the time in which the book was being written. So all of these things and all of these stories and all of these passions of mine and my hate of racism, all of it went into that book. And I should mention that right now it's under option and may be filmed yet. You know, that looks like that's possible. But it came from personal experience, and it came from the experience of my parents. It came from folklore. So the sources are multiple.
Right.
Con
Absolutely.
respecto, si me permitís, Pablo, con respecto a esa
Sí.
novela, recordarle a la gente que nos está mirando que esa novela The Bottoms, a la que se refiere Emiliano, está publicada en castellano. Si mal no me equivoco, me corregirá Eduardo, Cuando el río suena. Así que creo que ese sí el título. Sí, así que búsquenla, léanla, porque es un novelón, publicada in Spanish. Great, great novel.
Yes, Fernando is a warning to our audience that this great, great novel, The Bottoms, is published actually in Spanish by the name of
Cuando el río suena, creo.
Cuando el río suena. So
Sí.
we strongly recommend to our audience to get the book and read it all about, because it's great. How, you know, in many in the many scope of things I love. One of them is the blues, and I'm quite familiar with the whole Mississippi River, and from the north to the south, and this particular place that you refer as East Texas, that live absolutely in another country than the Houston and the other great cities of the mid Texas and the West Texas. And is a very great, is
The Bottoms is influenced by East Texas, but East Texas is different because its culture is some more southern than southwestern. It's more farm than cowboy. It's more the culture of the South. It profited more from, say, slavery in its time,
yeah,
because
indeed.
cotton was grown there. I mean, it's not that other places didn't, and not that other parts of Texas didn't, but East Texas did, especially because it was very agricultural and it was very productive agriculturally. And the blues were very much a part of that part of a country. And so in the same way that you had the people in the Delta, you had the people in East Texas, and then later in my time, you had like Lightning Hopkins and so on and so on. So there was, Lightning was Lightning. He was great, and I got to see him a couple of times. But the thing is that culture of the South is also East Texas mixed with other cultures, a little bit of Cajun culture because we're right next door to Louisiana, and then a little bit of the Western culture because the rest of Texas is a little bit more that way, or was at that time. And then there's the metropolitan aspect of it, which people don't think about, but Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio, El Paso, those places.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. Well, next question, Fernando.
Con, perdón, con respecto a gran parte de su obra literaria, uno de los temas que aparece repetidamente es el tema de la posibilidad de la redención de algunos personajes, y eso nos lleva a cierta idea de teología. En muchas de las novelas, en muchos de los cuentos de Mr. John Lansdale, aparecen figuras como, por ejemplo, preachers, que a veces son héroes, la mayoría de las veces son villanos, y entonces hay una relación ambivalente con respecto a la religión, más allá que siempre está esa idea de este personaje central puede llegar a redimirse o no. Mi pregunta entonces es, ¿cuál es su idea cuál es su idea teológica en general en relación a lo moral?
Okay. Fernando asked that since death in the West, your engagement with religious figures that often appear somewhat ambiguous, at times even portraying them as oppressive. Yet the possibility of redemption seems to occupy either the center or margin of your narrative. How would you characterize your theological outlook, particularly in moral terms?
Well, what I would say is that Dead in the West is a pulp novel. First of all, was my fun having a pulp novel and maybe touching on the old comics like Jonah Hex, which later I wrote. But I also am not a big fan of religion, and so that found its way into my book. And it was a way of also looking at racism, because the crime that initiates the horror, so to speak, is based on racism. And I found that that's very much a strong theme throughout my work, especially for many, many years, you know. And so for me, I just said, I want to tell this pulp story. And I never thought about I'm going to put this in or that in. But just because I'm me, those elements were there, those concerns were there. And as I wrote, they ease their way in. There's an old story, and it sometimes varies as to who the writer was, but supposedly, usually I hear it as Theodore Sturgeon, and he couldn't write. He wanted to write about the McCarthy era. He was during that time, and he really wanted to say something about it, and he just couldn't find it in the story. And he was talking to an editor, I think it was H.L. Gold, and he said, I can't write this, and I know I want to, but I don't know how to get into it. And H.L. Gold, he said something like this. He said, or at least the story goes, he said, well, what you do is you go home and you write a story about a guy that's standing at a bus stop, and this beautiful woman gets off, and he watches her, and then just write the story. And Sturgeon went, what? And he was saying, then he realized what he was telling him was, you write the story, and if something concerns you, it will find its way into the story. And I find that for me, that's often the truth. I can't say that's an absolute, but it certainly has been a lot of the truth for me. If I've got something on my mind, especially if it's something I'm angry about, I often find that it sort of bleeds into whatever the narrative structure is I'm writing, you know?
Right.
And that's what happened with Dead in the West.
Yeah. Emi.
Sí. En varias ocasiones, en varias entrevistas, Mr. Lansdale mencionó que la novela y las short stories, en español novela corta y relatos cortos, son la mejor forma, el mejor formato para escribir horror. Hoy las novelas, este es mi punto de vista, hoy las novelas las novelas de terror, parecen ser cada vez más largas. Mi pregunta es, ¿podría Mr. Lansdale explayarse sobre su propia opinión y por qué prefiere las novelas en lugar de novelas cortas, ¿no?
Yes, Amy said that in a past interview, you say that you frequently remark that the novella and the short story constitute the most fitting vehicles for horror. At present, however, we should agree that horror novels appear to be growing ever longer. Might you elaborate upon your position and explain why you are especially drawn to the novella?
I don't think it's an absolute. There are a lot of great horror novels that are written, and a lot of them are long, and some of them aren't. But my take was that most of the horror that has impacted me, not all, has been shorter. And short stories, especially, you know, are fantastic for horror because it doesn't give you a lot of time to start doubting the sort of idea that you're dealing with. If you're like me, you don't believe in the supernatural, but I can believe in it in a good story. But I'm not sure I can believe in it as well for 600 pages. There may be an exception to that rule. But I also think the novella, for instance, gives you enough room to tell the story and to develop characters. And I think that's the difference. And you can say, I want to talk about a historical event, for example, and that I want to bring in enough materials about that to make it clear. And so the novella is perfect for that. It gives you plenty of room to put in the facts. It gives you plenty of room to put in the lies. It gives you plenty of room to develop the magic. I want to be understood that I'm not trying to say those are absolutes. I've read some really shitty novellas and short stories too, but I just believe that they lend themselves to the kind of impact that horror creates better than something that just keeps pouring more water into it. Now, would I write a really long horror novel if I wanted to? You're damn straight I would. I don't hold any rules to myself. My first rule is there are no rules. There are suggestions, and but my take is that most of the stuff that I have read that has really impacted me in horror is short.
Yes. As horror writer, I couldn't agree more. So, okay. Fernando.
Eduardo había preguntado sobre los distintos lectores de sus novelas de crímenes, sus novelas o sus historias de terror, y Mr. John Lansdale contesta, los lectores saben que van a leer un Lansdale y saben lo que les espera. En ese sentido, una de las particularidades de la escritura de John Lansdale es sus weird westerns. Recordemos que él ha editado la colección Razor's Saddles, en su momento muy rompedora, no había una colección dedicada al weird western, y prácticamente él es el campeón de este subgénero. Entonces la pregunta es, ¿y qué cree él, qué considera él que le permite trabajar la mezcla entre western y terror?
Yeah. Before I translate the question of Fer about your collection razor saddles, let me tell you, Mr. Lansdale, that this very morning I talked to the editor, a publisher of a magazine called in Spanish Salvaje Sur, that Wild South, that is devoted to weird western. And when I say, this afternoon I will have the chance to interview Mr. Lansdale, the editor said, that is a friend of mine, of course, say, get out of here. Don't kidding. Get out of here. And I say, no, I promise. I will be interviewing Mr. Lansdale. Oh my goodness. I couldn't hardly believe. So they say, well, for this time, I will fire a candle on Mr. Lansdale honor when you will be interviewing him, because this magazine that is in the way of the old-fashioned pulp fiction, even with the paper and even with the ads, are nurture, are in some way, if I may say, the seed of your weird western. So, on behalf of all the weird readers and writers of the Salvaje Sur, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Lansdale, for your work in razor saddles and creating this kind of new
much.
genre.
I'm very flattered. I appreciate that. That may be too kind, but I'll accept it.
It's true, sir. Well, going back, sorry guys, but I have to say that because it's like, Fernando said that in 1989 you edited the groundbreaking, because it was a rupture, absolutely, in the way that the genre was going on for those days. That collection razor saddles devoted to, as we say, that the weird western. Since then, you have often been regarded as one of the genre's foremost champions. What thematic territories does the fusion of western and horror allow you to explore?
Everything. Yeah, the thing is that every genre has the potential for you to explore anything in it. You know, if the whole point of writing horror is just for that horrific moment, you can find that it becomes limited. And you know, that's fun. I like some things that are just, wow, that was just pure horror right in my face. I had fun with that. But I don't want to read 20 of them. And I think that it gives us room to look at a lot of different ideas and say, where is the horror in that idea, which you might not commonly think of, or the juxtaposition doesn't seem likely. And my take is maybe it is. Maybe it is likely. Maybe it's something every day, but there's just something wrong, you know? And so to me, it's a way to explore racism, which I did in a number of my horror stories. It's a way to explore all sorts of prejudice. It's a way to explore just weirdness. I think it's a way of just looking at yourself. So to me, no matter what the genre is, it has the potential to do a lot of different things in a lot of different ways.
Great. Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So, the next question, my friend.
Sí. Yes, justamente hablando de racismo, es un tema muy presente, obviamente a quienes hemos leído su obra, es un tema muy presente a lo largo de la obra de Mr. Lansdale. Mi pregunta o mis preguntas son si ha notado algún cambio, evolución, a falta de otro término más adecuado, en su propia obra en relación al tema racismo, y si cree que la literatura de géneros necesita enfocarse más en este eje, en este tema.
Okay, just talking about racism, all of us that we read your over your whole work realize that racism is a persistent presence throughout your over. Have you observed any evolution in your own treatment of the subject over the time? And do you believe that the genre literature ought to engage more directly with it?
More directly?
With the racism?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not suggesting I'm the only one, but I seem to be one of the ones who most frequently looked it right in the eye. And sometimes that's very uncomfortable for people. And I know that, and that goes back to the previous question about what you can do with horror, what you can do with crime, whatever. And so I was looking at things that were not just purely about entertainment, you know, because like I said, I was always so influenced by a lot of the literary writers and writers of the 60s and 70s and people that were, you know, concerned with these things and wrote novels and stories about them. So I figured, why can't these be incorporated? And in some cases, you know, some of my work has been published in literary magazines because they didn't think of them as horror. They've been published in horror because they didn't think of them as anything else. They've been published as crime because and talking about the same story, you know, or same stories. So to me is that it goes back really to the previous question, is that it gives you room to do anything and everything, but it's not always what the audience is looking for, that just wants to be entertained. You know, they want to just read a good monster story, which sometimes I do too, but I don't always want to. And I'm willing to look at different viewpoints and different ideas. You know, a lot of horror and short fiction handled things that dealt not only with racism, but homophobia and all sorts of things that normal fiction, normal pop fiction didn't, you know. So to me, you know, let's look at our fiction in the same way that somebody looks at it from a literary standpoint. Let's do it as well as we can, even if I'm just trying to make somebody laugh or have a good time. But also, I might want to do something like Night They Missed the Horror Show, which is the most anti-racist thing I ever wrote. But you have a trend now where people are so easily offended by everything that they can't see what it's about. You know, they see what hurts their feelings because their little feelings are so fragile these days, you know. And it's just amazing to me the lack of depth I know I read the other day, I believe it was in England, where somebody was doing a performance and they were doing an racism, anti-Nazi play. And in that, one of the characters was playing one of the Nazis, and he was giving this, horrible speech about, and people got out of the audience and attacked him because they were too stupid to realize that he was in character, and that the overall play was to find those things negative and to present those things negative. And we've lost the ability to understand that sort of thing. Satire is also almost, and it scares me because we're not having people that read much anymore. We're not having people that understand what they read. We're not having people that can deal with anything that makes them uncomfortable. They always want to make sure their little feelings aren't hurt. And when you look at horror is about being disturbing. It's about hurting your feelings. And certainly if it's got a literary intent that's also tied to social intent, it's often uncomfortable.
Right. Absolutely. Next question, guys, is
Eduardo, ¿querés preguntar algo?
Sí, justamente en relación a lo que preguntaba Emi sobre el racismo, si él siente que hubo atenuantes en la adaptación de la serie de Hap y Leonard, en el tema de la brutalidad y el racismo, o cree que se llevó bien como fue adaptada a la serie televisiva.
Eduardo would like to know that what do you think about the adaptation of Hap y Leonard and the thing of racism itself, that it was kept as well as the whole thing, or it was, what could we say, just make it easier for crystal eyes and ears. So what do you think about, sir, about this adaptation?
Of the TV show? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I thought it was good. I wish it had been even closer to my work, but I wrote the work. But I was a producer on the show and I wrote one of the scripts, but I thought there were times when they varied a little too far from what I had in mind. But on the whole, I thought they nailed it, and I was very happy with the adaptation.
Great.
Con respecto a su obra, uno de los temas que aparece todo el tiempo es el tema de parenting, básicamente cómo ser padre, cómo ser madre, y la división entre crianza y herencia, en donde muchas veces una niña, un niño sacado de un hogar de padres malos puede volverse bueno, puede criarse una buena persona si está criado por gente buena, por padres y madres buenas. Pero a veces la herencia es más fuerte. Mi pregunta es, ¿de dónde viene el interés por este tema sobre la crianza de los niños y los padres y madres malas?
All right. The question of Fer is quite deep, because he said that a recurrent concept of your work is parenting, particularly the tension between nurture and inheritance. Children of flawed or even malign parents may be redeemed through adoption into healthier families, yet at times heredity appears inescapable. So, what lies behind your sustained interest in this theme?
Of parenting. Is that it?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's something that as a parent, I'm concerned about. My kids are grown now, but when they were little, I thought, am I doing a good job? What do I do to make sure I'm doing a good job? What do I do to improve my job? And I thought about my parents, who were just terrific. We all have our faults, but my parents were great. And, my wife and I have been married 53 years, so we were we wanted to be good parents. And I kept thinking, well, what are these downfalls? And I was writing a novel called Cold in July. And in Cold in July, the kid in that is very much my son at that time, Keith, and how you're like, you're frustrated with him and you get worn out with, I don't really want to read the pokey little puppy right now. And then you feel bad because you don't, and just those things. But I looked at it in a bigger way too, because the protagonist had not been happy with how things had worked out with his father, who had committed suicide. And he had killed a guy whose father wanted revenge. And so everybody is fathers and sons in that. I mean, that's always the case, but it's accentuated and made part of the story. So for me, what drove the story was that trying to what not only what about being a parent, but what does a good man do or a good person do? Where is the line? What is the limit? And then eventually you might cross that line. Hap and Leonard cross that line. They're not classic heroes. When people think, oh, they're not. They have a lot of heroic elements, but they're vigilantes and they do things that they shouldn't. And sometimes it doesn't work out. And in Cold in July, I was dealing with those same questions. And again, it goes back to I'm writing a story, and whatever's bothering me at that time turns up in that story, and it becomes the fuel that drives the engine.
Excellent. Well, next question. First, you are, Fer.
Ahí está.
All right,
En la introducción de uno de los relatos recopilados en la excelente colección llamada The Essential Horror o John Lansdale, el mismo John Lansdale argumenta que muchos lectores, algún tema que ya trajo en una pregunta anterior, él argumenta que muchos lectores ya no son capaces de entender la sátira. Él dice, y cito, "We have all been dumbed down." Hace poco salió la noticia, me refiero a la semana pasada, de que muchos estudiantes de cine, por ejemplo, no pueden ver una película completa sin aburrirse. Entonces, ¿cuál es el rol del artista en esta situación en donde la atención parece disgregarse cada vez más?
Okay. Per asking a very hot situation that we have to face nowadays. Everybody who made some kind of entertainment for the people. That first refer to that in the introduction to one of your stories included in the excellent, he say 3 times excellent.
6 times excellent.
6 a collection, The Essential Horror of Joe R. Lansdale, that you suggest that many readers are no longer capable of apprehending satire, adding rather bluntly, quote, "We have all been dumbed down." Fine of the quotation. So it was recently reported that a number of film students are unable to watch an entire film without succumbing to boredom. In such a climate where attention seems increasingly fragmented. So, what, in your view, is the artist's responsibility, if any?
I think that the artist has to continue to be the artist. I think you have to do your work, that you have to approach it in the same way you were doing before and to find the truth. Now, the truth can vary somewhat for new experiences. The world can change. I mean, we have a moron for a president here. And so I look at that daily, and a lot of that is that you're having a lot of people who are morons too. And a lot of it is they choose to be. That's what saddens me. They're the happily stupid if they don't want to ask questions. And on both sides of the fence, I'm not just saying one. I think that the extreme is on the right, but there's extreme on the left. Like, oh my God, I heard a word and it hurt my feelings, no matter what its context. Context is the king. And that's what decides these things. And people can't see context anymore. What do we do about it? I have no idea. I think we may be screwed. There is a possibility that, one thing is that people spend as kids on their phones all the time, and they probably shouldn't have them in schools. They probably say, no, you don't have them. When you get out of school, then you go home and do that, but you're here to learn. And parents probably ought to restrict a certain amount of content as well. But will they? I don't know. I think if you depend on the parents, that it's hard to do with your kids. But who else should do it? That's the problem there too. I mean, it's a dilemma. But I do think that we're all guilty. I have a phone. I love my phone. I do a lot of my business on my phone. I can keep up with my friends. A lot of stuff that I used to do. But it becomes as much of a burden as anything else, because you think, okay, I got 15 minutes while I'm waiting on the dentist. So I'm just going to, sometimes you just need to sit there and learn to be alone with your own thoughts, because that's how you develop intelligence, I believe. And it's how you develop the ability to learn. It's how you develop the ability to concentrate. Because if you can't spend 15 minutes without looking at your fucking phone, then you got a problem. And we're just breeding new and new, groups that do that. Am I against the phone? No, but I am saying that at least we ought to have the young kids be there for education so they will read, because we're not going to have any readers. I mean, I look at the publishers, they're all disappearing. They're all going away, even the big ones. My publisher quit doing paperbacks, and the paperbacks are just gone, the little ones, but even the trade paperbacks, less so. It's the hardback and the ebook. I'm glad there's any book, don't get me wrong, but that indicates something that is not healthy. It means that a lot of people, they can't get readers, so they just no use publishing something that they're just going to end up being pulped, and it's frightening. Can it turn around? Well, if it does, it's going to have to turn around with a new generation of teachers and children that learn to read and respect reading. Because if you don't respect reading, you don't read. I can't tell you how many kids I talk to them about, hey, what are you reading? I don't read. What do you mean you don't read? I can read, I just don't read. And a lot of people that can read don't know how to read, not in a way that's critical. It's like we were talking about earlier. They see one word and they go, oh my God, what a horrible thing, instead of the context of the word and the context of the story. And there's some stories when I wrote them years ago, everybody got the context immediately. I mean, there's always some moron that doesn't, but most people got it. Now, a large percentage of people, they're so scared of not fitting in with their group and being, considered hip and considered to knowing what's right and wrong, that they end up being wrong all the time.
Yeah. Yes. I heard, I would like to have, if I may, that filmmaker, director Guillermo del Toro said that right now the filmmaking industry is competing with people with a sitting in the couch of their whatever house, and they are watching the movie at the same time they are reading or watching TikTok or this kind of entertainment platforms in their tablet or phone. So it's quite difficult to keep people to keep the people's attention in order to perform a whole thing that be understandable itself. And the other thing that I read a couple of days ago was that the paperback, as you say, is putting away for all the editors.
Yes.
And they say that the main reason is because in the old days, not the old days when my grandpa born at the beginning of the 20th century. But
Mhm.
the old days of my youth, we always go with a paperback because they are cheap. It's supposed to be like the cigarette box price, but we all go with a paperback book in our pockets
Mhm.
because at any time we got in the subway, in the bus, in the midtime, in the doctor consulting or whatever, you grab your book and keep reading. Right now, you cannot put your eyes away of the screen, but not the big screen, the little screen of your telephone. So the paperback books are rarities because nobody wants to read any kind of thing that is in paper instead of reading the thrilling, how called to say without saying shit.
Yeah. Well, I will do, how you read is how you read. I don't think it always has to be paper, but I sure don't think I hate seeing that paper is going away. One reason that happened though is that books became so damn expensive, and the paperback even became so expensive that it was almost better just to buy the trade paperback, which is also going away. And then it's just say, well, you might as well buy the novel, because what happened is that way back in the past, books were a luxury item. They were expensive. Somebody came up with these pulps and then these paperbacks, and they were cheap. They were once again a democratic form of reading. And then now they're gone to the point to where they're more luxury items. And there used to be books that probably appeal more to men than they do now, because if they appeal to men, we're all evil. So they don't want to do that. We're going through that stage. And I'm a feminist, don't misunderstand what I'm saying, but I'm saying that we just have this sort of selective approach to how we produce books and how we expect people to read them. And men and women can read the same books and enjoy them. I'm reading a book right now by a woman. My favorite writers are like Flannery O'Connor and Harper Lee, all women. Carson McCullers, love them. But there is a trend sometimes to direct the book at one group, be it, and in the past it was more male and it shouldn't have been, and now I think it's more female than it might have been some years back. Do I think that's bad unto itself? No. But do I think there's room for other things? Yes. And I think publishing is going through that and they're not dumb doing this. They know who their readers are now, who are women. But yet it's because, and I get this from a lot of men, says, where's my John D. McDonnell type books? Where's this or where's that? They aren't out there anymore. It doesn't mean that those books aren't worthy of change in some ways. I mean, they don't all have to be homophobic. They don't all have to be racist. They don't have to be anti-feminist. You can still write those books, and you can write male action books. You can write male adventure books, male crime books, whatever. And I'm not suggesting we all, do that, but I'm just saying there ought to be more variety. And there are women who write those kind of action and books that do a wonderful job. I just want things not to be so narrow. And I guess that's what I'm getting at. And like I say, in the past, it was men. Everything was men, and a woman, pick it up. Who do I relate to here? And I thought about even when my daughter was little, where are the books for her? Well, there are books now, and she just sold her first novel recently. So you just want a broader spectrum. And I want different kinds of stories. I want stories that come from an angle that maybe I don't even like, and if I hate it that bad, I don't have to finish it. Nobody's making me. So I guess what I'm saying is that we need to be not so selective about things that we're afraid are going to offend somebody, or just we decide this is commercially for this person or not. But we may be too far along now. It may be too hard to turn that bus around.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Next question, guys.
Yes. Sí, voy. Desde su novela Cold in July, previamente discutida, hasta la serie de relatos y novelas de Hap y Leonard, sobre cuya adaptación preguntaba Eduardo hace un momento, pasando incluso por las incursiones de Mr. Lansdale en el universo DC, sus múltiples relatos e inclusive su reciente adaptación de la novela The Thicker. La obra de Mr. Lansdale resultó o demostró ser muy cinematográfica. Mi pregunta es cuál es su experiencia, ya comentó respecto de la serie de TV sobre Hap y Leonard, pero cuál es su experiencia con las adaptaciones de su obra en general y si tiene alguna preferencia entre esas adaptaciones.
All right. Part of the question we had been discussing about that, what we are trying to go to the point that Amy said that from Call in July to Hap and Leonard, as Eduardo asked you, Hap and Leonard series, through your forays into the DC universe and numerous short stories. More recently, with the thicket, your work has consistently demonstrated a distinctly cinematic quality. What had been your experience in adaptation in general? You discuss about Hap and Leonard, but do you harbor any particular preference among them?
Bubba Ho-Tep.
Excuse me?
Bubba Ho-Tep.
Yeah.
Bubba Ho-Tep. Yeah.
Bubba Ho-Tep is almost just like the story. It's got some changes here and there, mostly due to lack of money, but it was a very, very good adaptation of my story, Bubba Ho-Tep. And
Yes, indeed.
Campbell was great, and Ossie Davis was great. So that's my favorite. And then after that, I guess the Hap and Leonard TV series, Cold in July. The Thicket was okay movie, but I felt like they got too far away from me, So I was not that happy with that. There, Love, Death, and Robots, this animated series, did some great adaptation of my stories.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes, it's great.
And then, of course, I wrote Batman the Animated Series and wrote Son of Batman movie, animated movie, and a lot of those were fun because even though they were established characters and all, I got to kind of take my head and do them, except Son of Batman was based on an existing comic, so there were limitations there. But I had a lot of fun with those. So when I can watch, especially the TV series, the Batman the Animated Series, and feel pretty good about those.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I couldn't agree more with the great TV series of Batman. Fair.
Paso a la penúltima pregunta, Pablo, y es bastante corta, que es, desde los albores de Internet, desde que Mr. Joe Lansdale lanzó su sitio propio web, siempre ha tenido la amabilidad de ofrecer muchísimos relatos, no 2, no 3, no 5, muchísimos, más de 40 relatos de los suyos, que después vemos recopilados en otros libros, gratis. ¿Por qué esa decisión? Sigue habiendo relatos, entren a su página que todas las semanas hay un relato nuevo. ¿Por qué esa decisión de entregar relatos suyos libres para que lo pueda leer cualquier persona y si no lo afecta económicamente?
All right. Fernando wants to know that even from the early days of the internet, you made a number of your stories freely available in your website.
Yeah.
Were you not concerned that such generosity might prove economically disadvantageous? What prompted that decision of even quickly uploading a new story to your fandom?
Well, everything's in ebooks and what have you now, so they can download them anyway. But the thing is, it's actually helped me more because people will read a story and go, I'm curious about that guy, and they'll go out and buy one of my collections or a novel or whatever. And so I find that I've written so many stories in my lifetime that I don't mind sharing them that way, a different one every week. And sometimes, and of course, they recycle. And I don't put them up. My webmaster does that for me, and he does a marvelous job. But he chooses them and picks the ones that he wants to put up. But, you know, it concerned me at first, but I actually think it's turned out to be an extremely effective sales marketing idea. Although I didn't know that, but my webmaster knew that, and he told me about it. And I said, well, okay, but if they get the stories there, why would they buy them? Because they do. And they say, well, I like that story, so here's a whole book of stories. Let me see about that. Now, could people just download and make their own package? They could. Do I get pirated? I do. Is it because they're on there? No, not necessarily. They pirate the collections when they come out. In fact, I have a big suit right now. A whole bunch of us do, with people that were, you know, books that were stolen, and it looks like we're all going to get paid very nicely. So, you know, the hell with them. They made the mistake.
Yes. Okay. Fernando.
Your last question is sobre sus últimas novelas y trabajos, en donde ha escrito con su hijo Kate y su hija Cassie. Y quería saber qué cree Mr. Joe Lansdale que escribir con sus hijos ha agregado a su narrativa.
Fernando is referring that what is it like to write in collaboration with your son Keith and your daughter Casey? What do you feel they have brought to your stories that might not otherwise have been there?
Well, you know, it's funny. I never liked collaborations. I did a few of them, but I didn't like them. And when my daughter first asked me to collaborate with her, I said, no, I don't want to do that. And so what she did was she wrote part of a story and sent it to me. And I went, damn, it's a good story. So I couldn't help myself. So I wrote some of that, and we ended up with a story together. And I found that she was really easy to work with because we had very similar voices, and she had ideas that I didn't even think of, you know. And then my son was the same, you know. He was a little bit more, let's say, less. His style was less like mine, but we had a lot in common as far as ideas about humor and things like that. And so we worked well together. And my kids are the only people that I really collaborate with these days. It doesn't mean that I might not under some rare circumstance, but we all get along and enjoy doing it. And my son, you know, he does his own. He sold a couple of scripts to movies, and the movies got made. And my daughter has her first novel coming out. She sold tons of short stories by this point. There's a short story collection coming out as well. And so they stand on their own 2 feet, you know. And so when I work with somebody that's already a professional in their own right, I can always learn something new too, because they are younger, they have different ideas and different approaches. And the thing is that no matter how long it's like martial arts, no matter how long you've been writing, there's always something new that you can learn, always another way of approaching it. Because once you think you know it all, you're screwed, because then you just can't change, you know. One of the things I did just recently is I wrote the last Hap and Leonard novel. It's coming out this fall. It's called Petrified Dreams, and that's it. So I'm moving on to a whole new approach, you know. And of course, I wrote a lot of things during Hap and Leonard too, a lot of things of that nature. But I felt like it was time for me to let them rest. And that's what I'm doing. What does that mean? I might never come back? Who knows? You know, I never say never. But I just felt like it was time. And as soon as I did, my mind was flooded with all of these new ideas and different approaches, and I'm doing those now.
Yeah. I know my friend Fernando, that you mentioned the sense of humor, got a shallow question about the sense of humor that is all around your work, a particular sense of humor that is kind of a comedy in the good sense, and you cannot you can help to smile or even laugh with the situation that you portrayed with this absolutely coming of nothing sense of humor that you introduce in your work. Where if I'm asking for my friend Fernando, where this sense of humor and where this how to say das bias, humorous bias came from?
Well, I think it's built into me. I mean, where I come from, people deal with a lot of bad things with humor. And when I was growing up, my father could not read or write. And a lot of people I knew were illiterate or poorly literate. And so one of the things they do is they would use a lot of metaphorical simile ideas and humor to make what they were trying to say more real. And I picked up on a lot of that. And in my high school, even, people that were educated or were learning to be educated, and, that was the way we dealt with things, was humor. And sometimes it was humor that in the light of pretty bad things. And I think too that, obviously I was influenced by people like Mark Twain and, who knows who, all kinds of writers, Robert Bloch, Flannery O'Connor is pretty funny. All of those writers impacted me. And I think that the humor comes from my own background as well as, people I've read. But it's my natural way of dealing with things,
Oh, right. Great. Well,
entonces, agradeciéndole el tiempo, Pablo, le hacemos nuestra verdadera última pregunta.
Yes. We have finished with our script of question, but we always have for our interviewers the same final question.
All right.
What do you up to, if you can share with us?
Yeah.
If not, yes.
I just finished the second draft of a screenplay for George R.R. Martin, who's producing a story adaptation I did of Howard Waldrop's story, A Dozen Tough Jobs. I did a short story of his for George with Vincent D'Onofrio, who directed it and starred in it. And that hadn't come out yet. It's been done for a few years, but they're trying to put it together with some other stories of Howard's to have like an anthology of Howard Waldrop stories. The longer one I did is being done by Lines Forge, and I think they're going to go to start filming it sometime this year. That's the plan. So I did that. I'm working on a memoir I was asked to do, and I'm overdue, but I told them that I would be overdue. So I'm working on a memoir. I just recently went over the Petrified Dreams, the last Hap and Leonard novel, making certain little corrections and things like that. And so that's been what I've been doing. And I have a big novel planned that I'll probably start next month. And I have a Tarzan novella that I'm working on for the Edgar Rice Burroughs people. So as usual, I'm busy.
Yeah. Here, sir. So we have to thank you because, as we say at the very beginning of this interview, we all here, we are honored of having you on the other side, in this case, black side of the
Well, I'm honored to be here, and I respect that y'all asked me to be here, and that means a lot to me. And I hope you enjoyed my answer to your very good questions.
Absolutely. And let me tell you that the grace of your answers mesmerize us without, it doesn't matter that you are not on the flesh, because your words, sir, is you have the storytelling of the ancient. I'm not saying that you are an ancient, but
You know, I'm actually
No,
pretty
no,
angry.
no, no. I'm trying to say the ancient druids, the ancient shamans, the people who call a tribe around the fire to tell a story and
Well,
learn.
there's
And,
a
and,
reason for
and
that too. And I grew up with storytellers. My dad was a great storyteller, and they used to sit in the yard and tell stories. So I forgot to mention that earlier, but that's a tremendous influence on what I do, is listening to a family of storytellers and friends that had storytellers. So I'm glad to be in that group because that goes all the way back to Homer and beyond that. So thank you. I really appreciate that.
yeah, yes, it's here, here. It's true. We have for more than hour that really appreciate your time, mesmerized with your storytelling and your answer, no matter that you are not visible, that in this twilight zone interview of our. So thank you very much indeed. We are really honored and keep working. We really appreciate
The honor's
you.
all mine, guys, all mine. Thank you so much.
Okay, sir. It was a
Adios.
pleasure. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.
Ay,
Oh, another time, I hope.
Another
Correct.
time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.